Welcome to that Twilighty show about that zone. I'm with Nicole Phelps, and we're going to discuss He's Alive from 1963, starring a very young Dennis Hopper.
Mm-hmm.
How about that in this episode? And he's a really dynamic, fantastic actor. He's really good in this episode too. And it's a very frightening episode because this is an episode that teaches you what the Nazis are, what they were, how they can flourish. This is the most important part of this episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's often seen as a very preachy episode because there's a lot of moralizing, and you can kind of see the ending, or you can see Dennis Hopper's final revelation, well in advance. It's like I feel like the audience is one step ahead. You know who Dennis Hopper's talking to.
Right. Yes.
You absolutely know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
I agree.
But for me, it's a very controversial episode because this was aired in January of 1963, which wasn't even 20 years after the end of the war.
Right.
And it wasn't 20 years after the end and the atrocity that because we didn't really know what was going on our country did not know what was going on. The only people who knew were the soldiers, the people who came to liberate the camps. And my grandfather served in World War II. He was a paratrooper. He landed behind enemy lines, buried himself in the snow. I think I've told this story a few times.
Wow.
His entire platoon was killed because the Germans bayoneted the ground. He buried himself so deep underground that under the snow that he was not bayoneted. He wound up getting frostbite. And then he got back up after they left. He was captured by his own people because he lost his dog tags. He had to spend 2 days in lockup until his identity could be verified. He wound up getting the Purple Heart, and I believe he wound up getting the Bronze Star as well. So he's a big hero.
Yeah.
It was a horrible war. It was a lot of brutality, and there was a lot of things that he couldn't see or deal with. We talked about PTSD. He suffered from it. He drank. And it wound up killing him at a relatively young age, I would say, in his 50s or so. I think he died in 1981 or 1982, something like that.
Okay.
But it was a rough war.
Yeah.
But what's important about this episode is to see this kid played by Dennis Hopper, who is angry.
A conspiracy personified by the yellow man, by the black man, and by foreigners who come in and infiltrate into our economic structure. Oh, there'll come a morning. Yes, there will. There will come a morning when these men have taken over your home, they've taken over your daughters, and they'll be sitting right there on your doorstep.
If anybody's sitting on your doorstep, buddy, he's a man in a white coat. You better just go with him quietly.
He's obviously very angry. And you get to the core of what is troubling him. He was bullied as a child. He was abused by his father. He was ignored. He was neglected by his mother.
Yeah.
So this is a kid who grows up and for some reason decides, hey, I'm going to be a Nazi or something like that.
Yeah.
So he has this group. He has this group of Nazis. And they dress the part.
Yeah.
A lot of times we... especially in this day and age, 2019, United States of America, we hear so much about white supremacy. We hear about white nationalism. And I was looking at a video of this young lady named Candace Owens, and she was trying to make a distinction between what a white nationalist is and what the German nationalist is, and how Hitler could not be considered a nationalist because he killed his own people. And a nationalist, I don't know. It's a definition. It's a very fuzzy definition, and we often get into these horrible debates with each other. It's so weird. We're Americans. We're arguing with each other about this, about the difference between nationalism and patriotism. I don't like to go down that route, but it makes me angry that if you don't agree immediately with someone, you're considered a Nazi or a Hitler or something like that. And I don't know what it's like where you are. You're in Oregon. I'm in New York. New York, as you remember, New York is an incredibly culturally diverse place. There are so many different types of people. In my neighborhood alone, there are so many different types. There are whites, there are blacks, there are Muslims, there are Hispanics, there are Italian, Irish, Greek, whatever. You name it.
Yeah.
Dominican, Puerto Rican. You know, it's every race under sun. We all get along. We really do get along. I think a lot of times the media tends to use this. They try to confuse us. They try to make us hate each other, and I don't like that. That's something that really irritates me, and it sounds like something that Nazis might do. This is what one of the pieces of advice that this weird shadowy character gives Dennis Hopper. He tells Dennis Hopper's character that they're victims. Consider yourself a victim. Consider yourself part of the victim culture. Manipulate your audience into feeling sympathy for your movement. And that's how you spread this message, I think.
Right.
How do you move a mob, Mr. Vollmer? How do you excite them? How do you make them feel as one with you?
I don't know how.
Join them first, Mr. Vollmer.
Join them?
Yes. When you speak to them as if you were a member of the mob. Speak to them in their language, on their level. Make their hate your hate. If they are poor, talk to them of poverty. If they are afraid, talk to them of their fears. And if they are angry, Mr. Vollmer, if they are angry, give them objects for their anger.
Well, first I'm going to talk a little bit about Dennis Hopper.
Right.
One of the great actors. He was kind of actually back in those days he was considered a teen heartthrob,
Yeah.
along with people like Tab Hunter, Troy Donahue, James Dean, who he hung out with, and Dean Stockwell, and Anthony Perkins. I mean, these guys. He had a really incredible gift of having this vulnerability to him in his performance, but also this anger.
Yep.
That's why he's perfect for this role.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
You can totally see this. And then, of course, he kind of moved into the new modern movement of filmmaking.
Right.
Well, he was in a lot of classics. He played in a lot of westerns. I remember seeing him in he was in Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman, playing one of the prisoners in there, a young man. He was in True Grit with John Wayne. And then he kind of moved on, joining up with Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider, directing his first movie and starring in it, called Easy Rider, of course.
Right.
And then he made this movie after, a follow-up called The Last Movie, which didn't get played because, I mean, like it was released, it cost too much money. He did too many drugs. He did a lot of drugs. He was a big drug taker and a very abusive person to know.
Oh.
And he had like this lost period that extended into the 80s. At the time, at the end of that cinematic, that new filmmaker-driven movement from the late 60s to about maybe the late 70s, where, you know, directors were considered the kings of filmmaking.
Right.
Until they started to believe their own hype and give in to their own excesses and spend too much money. And now we have this system of big box office movies that have to make a certain amount of money. But Dennis Hopper was instrumental as part of that movement. And then he came back with, I think it was Blue Velvet, the David Lynch movie. And he became a big star, and, you know, he continued on that way. He died, I think, when did he die?
I think it was 2010 in Taos, New Mexico, I think, is what Andrew told me.
And Taos is interesting because it was a place that he always went. It was a place that he loved. He actually edited the last movie, his movie that he directed, the last movie, in Taos.
Okay.
With a lot of substances, and he took a lot of drugs, and he partied with chicks in his bathtub. And there was a documentary that was made about it. I think it was.
Oh, really?
There was a documentary that was made about Dennis Hopper shooting this movie, the last movie.
Oh, interesting.
It was called The American Dreamer.
Oh, interesting.
Because the last movie it's a very weird little movie about a stuntman in Peru. They're shooting a Western, and the native tribe that's living there near the production decides to make their own movie, but they do it with weird cardboard cutouts of cameras and lights, and they pretend that they're making their own Western too. And so he's working with them to make their fake movie while he's working on this other movie. It's a bizarre movie.
That sounds bizarre. So was he using substances like to the end? Like, was he always like a partier?
No. After, I would say probably 1984, 1985, before he started work on Blue Velvet, he had totally cleaned himself up.
Okay.
So he was like, but you don't do that. He was one of these guys who used to, smoke weed and drop acid every day of his life for like 10 years.
Oh my God.
Hang out with Jack Nicholson and just do all kinds of drugs.
Yeah.
But like I said, very talented actor, very talented filmmaker. Very
Yeah.
good filmmaker.
So when did Hoosiers?
Well, Hoosiers, Hoosiers was around the time that he had cleaned up.
Yeah, because that was he was great in that.
As 86. And didn't he get an Oscar nomination? Wait, let me see. Yeah. Dennis Hopper was nominated.
Okay.
For an Oscar for that.
Yeah, because that was a brilliant performance by him of just,
He's,
the alcoholic dad trying to
I love,
rise
the
above.
thing about, I've been to junk movies that are fun too.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoyed him in Speed, playing the Mad Bomber.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Speed, you got to see Speed. If
Okay.
you haven't seen Speed, it's fantastic. Keeps you on the edge of your seat.
Okay, I love it.
It's about a bus that has to stay above 50 miles an hour, otherwise it'll blow up.
Oh,
It's just a dumb, mindless action
Yeah.
movie, but it's a lot of fun. It's very clever. It's
Love
Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock in the role that made her famous, actually.
oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I'll put that on my
Oh, you
list.
gotta
I
find it,
never
yeah.
saw it. Yeah, I do love a good, fun action movie.
Yeah, it's a popcorn movie, definitely.
Awesome.
Okay, so back to He's Alive. Now this kid can't seem to get the enthusiasm going for his neo-Nazi party.
Right.
And the thing, he dresses the part, like I said, and he's got his staff or whatever you want to call them, his assistants.
Yep.
And they all dress up in these Nazi outfits, right?
Yep.
And they have the iconography down.
Right.
These aren't guys wearing T-shirts or anything like that. They're dressed like Nazis. They don't have the particular Nazi symbol. They have the symbol of their party, whatever their party is.
Right.
And they're saying the same kind of things that a lot of Nazis or neo-Nazis or maybe even white supremacists who truck in that kind of anger.
Right.
What are they telling you? They're telling you, everybody's trying to keep you down. He even points to the white people and he says, you are the minority now. Because this kind of stuff is what's going to get people angry. But it seems like a lot of these people hate these guys. They beat them up. They start fights with them.
Right.
He comes home from getting punched and beaten up. He's got, he shares a room
Right.
with an old man who is a concentration camp survivor.
Yeah.
And he, the old man, of course, he plays what does he play? Like a viola? What is
A cello.
Is that a
cello?
Oh, it's a cello. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It's a cello, and he's a musician, and he has to listen to all this rhetoric that Dennis Hopper is spouting.
Right.
And where we get to the point where we understand why Dennis Hopper feels the way he does, because he was abused, he was beaten as a kid.
Right.
Is that I don't understand how that brings him over the edge to this.
Well, I think it's that, for me, like, it's almost like that it's like those were the seeds that sort of were sowed in him. And that's like what kept growing. It's like fear, it's anger, it's all those negative emotions that just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And like for him, it like manifested into this hatred and need for like, oh my gosh,
there's my cat.
There's Siren. Oh, Hi, Siren.
She's been meowing for 18 years, so now
Oh
she's
my
got kind of a
gosh.
raspy.
I love her raspy. She's like Kathleen
sounds like-
Turner.
Well, I was going to say Brenda Vaccaro, Lucille Ball.
Yes.
Meow. She just talks like that. So what were you saying? Go
Yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
no. So I just feel like that is sort of like what, like he couldn't overcome it. Like it just, because, the old man who he lives with, is talking about how he would find him like curled up in a ball outside his door, because his mother was, mentally ill and couldn't take care of him, like didn't even know him. I think he said at sometimes that she didn't even know who he was. And dad was really abusive. And so he would come to this man's house who's known him his entire life. And he would feed him and take care of him and really was like a father figure to him. And I think the hate and the anger that he has maybe directed towards, those primary caregivers are the ones that created this, that sort of like monster that he became.
What difference does it make if we don't think alike about the same things? I mean, we're friends. You've known me since I was a kid.
When you were a little kid, Peter, and I used to find you crying at my door late at night, I could pity you then.
And now?
What do you think? Now you peddle hate on street corners, as if it were popcorn.
It's not hate. It's a point of view. It's a philosophy.
Ah, I know the philosophy. I know it quite well.
And then later that night, he gets a visit from a creepy, shadowy dude, and we know who this is.
Yes.
We obviously know who this is.
Yes.
He's like, I'm impressed by your work. He talks in the German accent. He's like, I've got some ideas. Hey, why don't we get together and have a cup of coffee or something?
Yeah. Right.
So he's like coaching Dennis Hopper.
Yeah,
on
he's
how
like
to...
nurturing. It's like that's what it almost is. This is exactly what I'm like imagining. It's the angel and the devil. Like the old man is like his angel that is like telling him like you have to, you're sad, you're angry, you're scared, you're full of fear. Like you need to overcome it. And then this shadowy figure who's very, like they even kind of show little, outlines that make it
you
pretty
definitely
clear.
You definitely know. Yeah.
Is like the devil, and it's like a battle of good and evil, and those two characters are sort of driving this guy in one direction or another.
Yeah, and that character in the shadows. Later, he tells him that he's made of steel, that nothing can hurt him.
Yeah.
Of course, he's wrong about that, as we know by the end of the episode. But the first thing that this guy, the shadow guy, tells him is that he has to stir up intrigue within his own group. He has to kill one of them or something like
Right.
that. He has to have him killed, call him out as some kind of a spy, some kind of a narc who is working for the cops.
Right.
So he kills this guy who's like one of his friends, one of his right-hand men. Nick, I think was his name. And then
Or
after
was it
that,
Frank?
He tells. Well, no, Frank. Oh, Frank, by the way, is played by Paul Mazursky, the film director.
Oh, okay. So Frank
he was
is the
an
one
actor.
who kills Nick.
He says we got to kill Nick or something like that.
Okay.
I don't know that Dennis Hopper is the one who actually pulls the trigger on that.
No, I think it's
he
his
takes.
little
You know
crony.
Yeah. What's interesting about this is that they use the death of Nick to create a martyr, so that everybody will be sad that this guy died believing in the cause.
Right.
So I mean, it's like two lies
Yeah.
are being perpetrated there, and then this person is, I guess, he tells him to kill the old man, to kill this guy Ernst.
Yes.
And again, it's just I mean, like some of this is a little bit preachy. I forgot to mention that the director of this episode is Stuart Rosenberg.
Oh.
Who directed Cool Hand Luke and The Amityville Horror.
Okay.
And I believe, I'm not sure, The Pope of Greenwich Village with Eric Roberts going, they took my thumb, Charlie, they took my thumb.
Oh, wow.
But again, Stuart Rosenberg, fine director, directed Mute, one of my favorite episodes of the 4th season that I did with my daughter. This Dennis Hopper, I have to believe, he might be charismatic and everything, but he's really kind of an idiot, isn't he? He's just a, pardon my French, he's a fucking moron.
Dennis Hopper's character.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that he is just like, he's fueled by fear, and therefore he's like super cowardly because he's terrified of everything, essentially.
That's the thing. That's where violence comes from. Violence comes from fear.
Yeah. Yes.
It comes absolutely from fear. You know, the thing is, as Americans, we should all be. You know, thank you, sweetie.
Aww.
Thank you. We should all be united.
Yeah.
We should all be united. There should be no division.
Right.
And because this is what division does to people. It makes them form their own stupid groups, and then they go around and try and kill each other. I mean, this should not be happening.
Terrifying.
In where we are now, this is 2019. This is the greatest country in the world. This is a place where you can have anything you want.
Yeah.
This is a place where you have unparalleled freedom and personal liberty. This is not Nazi Germany. And I think a lot of people get the wrong message. I mean, I've been rolling over this quote from George Orwell the past few days when I was researching this episode. It's from 1984. It's the past was erased, the erasure was forgotten, the lie became the truth.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I feel like we're looking in the face of staggering illogic a lot of times, and it really makes my heart sad. I hate to see that. It makes me physically ill.
Yeah. Yes, it's a very stressful time, and there's a lot of people who are being hurt and killed because of it. And it comes from, I think, what we saw in this episode is just that fear, and being driven by that fear.
Mm-hmm.
And Siren
and being
agrees.
driven by raspy voiced cats.
That's
too.
right. Oh my God. She's such a New Yorker. I love her.
Yes. Well, she is a New York cat. Well, they all are now. I mean, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, she's the only one of the three that's a store-bought princess. We bought her in a pet store back when she was a kid.
I remember when you got her.
Yeah, we called
her.
We called her Siren because her meow back then sounded like a police siren.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I remember when I would come over, she would be like under the tub, I think.
Yeah.
That was like her spot.
Okay, back to
to
He's Alive.
Yeah.
He's Alive with Dennis Hopper. So it's finally revealed toward the end that this guy steps forward from the shadow, and he's Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
And the overall message of this whole thing is that I think Rod Serling actually puts it at the end, where he says, "Where there's hate, where there's prejudice, where there's bigotry, he's alive. He's alive so long as these evils exist." Remember that when he comes to your town. Remember it when you hear his voice speaking out through others. Remember it when you hear a name called, a minority attack, any blind, unreasoning assault on a people or any human being. He's alive because through these things we keep him alive.
Yeah.
Serling was so happy with the script that he wanted to make a movie version of this episode. Actually.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
I can't imagine it'll be made. It seems very incendiary. I mean, this is very. Twilight Zone has approached Nazis before. There was an episode from the 3rd season called Death's Head Revisited, where a former Nazi commandant from a concentration camp goes back to visit this camp, and he's haunted by the ghosts of the people that he killed there. Very deep, dark, and depressing stuff. And since they were only like 20 years out from the end of the war,
right?
It still didn't affect anybody until a few years later when they had the Nuremberg trials and we saw the atrocity that was committed. Right. But the thing is, I mean, the people in my family, maybe even people in your family, anybody who served in the war, they came home, they told people these stories of what they saw.
Right. Well, I think some did, and I think some couldn't. Like some people just couldn't talk about it.
Well, think about where we are in relation to 9/11. 9/11 happened 18 years ago.
Yeah.
We're almost at the exact point where these people in 1963 were from the war. So it's like still 9/11 is an incredibly horrible thing to talk about. It's a horrible thing to contemplate. It's a horrible thing to remember, but it is something that we must always remember. We must never forget 9/11.
Right.
Just like we must never forget, say, Pearl Harbor.
Right.
Or the end of the war, or Vietnam, or any number of these things that happen. They should always be present in our thoughts. It should always be remembered.
Yeah.
Regan was born in 2006. She doesn't really know much about this.
Right.
They talk about it at school.
Right.
She's seen some of the footage.
Yep.
And I'm kind of myself personally, I'm a tragedy junkie.
Yeah.
So I look back on a lot of that stuff. I'm very interested in knowing why things happen, why they happen, when they happen, things like that.
Right.
And I studied journalism in high school too.
Right.
So it's always been about that with me. I'm always very interested in names, dates, places, incidents, why things happen.
Right.
For instance, what was happening in Germany after World War I, that an entire country could fall under the spell of this one person.
Right.
It's very interesting to me.
Yeah. It's terrifying.
Yeah. And it's not. It's even though it happened. How many years ago now? I mean, where are we? Let me see. 2019. And World War II. Let me see. 40. Oh God, I am so bad at math. My daughter's better at math than I am. 51, 61, 71, 81, 91. Right, 50, 60 years. Let's say 60 years. No, 70 years. Let's just say 70 years for the hell of it.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was 70 years ago. And we're still kind of feeling the effect of it anyway.
Right.
But if the further you get away from that past, the more likely you are to forget it.
Yeah.
And that's to me, that's much more horrifying than what actually happened. The idea that we could actually forget that this happened.
Yeah, that's exactly, because then that's when we start seeing things repeating themselves.
Well, yeah, that's
and then
the same.
people are shocked that it's happening.
Those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there you go. Now Dennis Hopper, the cops are there to arrest him for the murders of these, and he runs and he gets shot. It's a little bit much. These days you could probably take these cops to the ACLU and have them sued.
I know. They just start hauling off.
He's running. Grab your gun. Wait a minute.
know.
What?
Yeah.
Bam, bam,
It
bam.
was like a shootout, like a mobster from a mobster
it was almost like a hit.
scene.
But
Yeah.
he falls into the garbage. He's dying, and he's trying to figure out why, because Hitler told him he was made of steel.
Yes.
And he says, "I can't die. I'm made of steel."
Right.
And then he dies.
Right.
And then Hitler is walking along his shadow. He's like a ghost. Hitler is a ghost in this movie. He's a monster. He's a demon, I guess, that possesses people. That's what it is. That's the takeaway.
Yeah.
From the episode, is that
Yes.
he's a demon, and he possesses, and evil will always be around.
Yeah.
Now, I always thought of evil, to get a little metaphysical on you. To me, evil is strictly a subjective point of view. I don't think an entire crowd can look on one thing and call it evil. I think that if somebody wrongs you in your life, you're likely to consider that person to be evil. But then the person next to you won't think that person's evil.
Right.
I feel like evil is subjective in that way. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, each culture, each group of people sort of has their norms and parameters around what is acceptable and not acceptable. So I definitely think that there's probably, acts that people, a group of people do something, and that creates, the majority of people see it as a wrong or an evil act, because of parameters that we have as a culture, as humans, but yeah, I think there is also, it's subjective, because if there's another, there's always another side, or people looking at, the other.
I want to ask you, how much not to get political or anything.
Okay.
How much of what you think is happening these days is being stirred up by the media to make us hate one another because it makes for good news?
Yeah, I think it has. I think there's a lot to do with it. I mean, I think that I guess it's this whole concept. We talk about like fear and how insidious that is, right? And I remember there was a period when I first moved here, and I hadn't started working yet, and I was watching like a lot of daytime television. So I was like listening to the news in the morning and then just kind of watching like daytime television more regularly than I normally would. And like all of the commercials were like pharmaceutical commercials talking about illnesses.
Right.
There were lawyer commercials on about, if you're in an accident or you're this or that has happened to you, call us.
Right.
And like, by the end of the day, I would be a nervous wreck. Like I was anxious. I was nervous about stuff. I was like overthinking things. And I feel like the media plays a big part in, or what we consume, right? It depends on what we consume. But if we just consume, the news and this 24-hour, news cycles where they just repeat things over and over again, like you can't tell me that does not affect how we feel.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. So completely.
Yeah, I absolutely think that it has, it's the whole idea that if somebody is constantly being told, you're an idiot, like, what do you start believing? That you're an idiot. Yeah. If you're being told that you're amazing and loved, you believe that you're amazing and loved. But I feel like the media feeds that fear and the terror. I mean, even like the like out here, I don't know if in New York there's a lot of these, but like the home security system stuff.
Right.
The dark web stuff. Your identity is going to be stolen. I mean, all of this is like commercial after commercial after story after story. How are we not going to
designed to manipulate you into thinking your life is in danger, your money's in danger, your security is in danger.
Yeah, your identity is in danger.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything.
Yes, exactly. All right.
Yeah.
Preach it. Okay.
Okay.
Coming to the end of it, what did you think of this episode?
It was like scary, like it's
scary.
One of those, like, I think Dennis Hopper was, his acting was really awesome. But the message, I mean, again, I think that little monologue that Rod Sterling that you read at the end really is powerful. And it's just one of those reminders. It's like, yes, if you allow this to come into your community and your home, into your mind, it can really take over. And I think it's true. So it was uncomfortable.
Think,
It was an uncomfortable episode because of everything that is brought up. But it's also one of those, like, really pretty deep message.
Yes. And I think people may not even know it, but they are kind of being conditioned, manipulated into believing a lot of things. That's why I don't listen to anything.
Right.
I mean, I look at all points of view and I don't believe it.
Yeah, like
I
have really had to like rethink how I consume news.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with the fact that you and I are both parents now. And I can tell you I changed quite a bit. I mean, I still have my core liberal principles.
Sure.
There's a lot of things though, but being a father has really kind of changed my outlook on a lot of things. I think I've actually, I don't want to blow my own horn here, and of course people are going to come out and say shut up, Lawler, but I feel like I've grown a little bit wiser in my old age here. I really do. Once you understand it, once you understand why things are the way they are, it can bring you a little bit of comfort.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I think so. And I also feel like, I think that it's important for us to just be mindful and really be critical thinkers, which I think you were kind of talking about. Just really being critical thinkers about
cynical.
And not just,
we have to be cynical.
a little
we have
cynical,
to question.
Yeah, I think, we have to question things, and we have to re-question things, and we have to really
question everything.
Yeah.
Question.
Yes.
Yeah. Question. Ask yourself, why is this happening? Who stands to benefit? Always ask that question. Who benefits from this?
Right.
And I think right now the media is benefiting. Okay. Well, that's great. This, for me, the episode again, kind of, it suffers just a little bit from kind of being just a little bit stagey. There's a little bit of stage acting going on, and it is a little bit padded out, but there's a lot more meat to it. There's a lot more substance going on here. They're getting into the habit of being able to tell a story in an hour-long format.
Right.
And they're starting to with this episode, and they really nail it with the next one, Mute, which I recorded with my daughter because I wanted to get the 12-year-old's perspective. And incidentally, if you haven't seen that episode, Nicole, watch it. It's a fantastic. It's such a beautiful episode.
Okay.
If you haven't,
Yeah, I have it. So I'm gonna watch it.
watch it with your daughter.
Okay, I will.
It's a great episode to watch. It's about a child who does not speak but has telepathic powers, featuring a very young Angelian in the role. It's a fantastic. It's my favorite episode of the Twilight Zone. Watch it, please.
Wow. Okay, good. And I can't wait to hear you and Regan talk about it.
Oh yeah, and you get her perspective, which is very interesting.
love
It's
it.
very interesting to get a 12-year-old's perspective on this stuff.
She's great.
Yeah, she's a pain in the ass, but she's brilliant. What can I say?
I believe that she's brilliant.
So, like I said, next time I will be discussing Mute with my daughter, Regan Lawler. And the next time we're going to get together, I guess we're going to talk about... what are we going to talk about here?
Death Ship?
Take a look at my... Death Ship. Let me see here. Get on down here. Yeah, we'll be talking about Death Ship the next time we speak with Jack Klugman from The Odd Couple.
Yes.
But until then, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. I'm Casey Kasem. Good night. Say good night.
Good night.
Okay.
There isn't a single adult today that in good conscience would make the argument that America is a more racist or a more white nationalist society than it was when my grandfather was growing up. And yet we're hearing these terms sent around today because what they want to say is that brown people need to be scared, which seems to be the narrative that we hear every 4 years right ahead of a presidential election.